Hi, welcome to HeKate's Crossing. Okay, we're starting with formative decks. So I'm starting with the Native American Tarot. That was my first deck. And I also got the Crystal Alley cards to use, and then it was the Sacred Path cards that I used with the Native American Tarot. I used those together. I did get some other decks. I also got the Vision Quest Tarot and the Medicine Woman Tarot as well. So I'd use these decks in readings for clients and etc. One JJ Swiss Tarot was another deck that was very informative in my early years. Crop Circle cards, which are unfortunately OOP, out of print of course. The original Enchanted Map Oracle was another one that I'd sort of add to my collection after a few years. Titiana's Fortune cards introduced me to Lenormand. I really enjoyed working with Titiana's Fortune cards. I really found that it gave me a sense of basic Lenormand instruction. Titiana's Fortune cards are a really great introduction. They're very clear imagery as well, which was an absolute great way to connect. Anyway, okay, as we move into the two-path cards. Now, two-path cards are unfortunately out of print, and I cannot find them again. I have looked and looked and looked, so I cannot actually replace this deck physically, which I'm quite sad about. Now this four-part deck had cycle cards, which are the black cards. The bluish cards were the cycle cards. You then had also the house cards, which were like a tarot system, and then you also had the explorer cards. So together they made up that two-path card set. Okay, so I will continue showing my decks. Hi, welcome to the second part of this formative decks. Okay, you've seen the decks that I had originally in my early years of working with tarot. In the early, should I say, late 1990s to mid 2000 to early 2000s. They were the first lot of decks that I sort of really started to work with, that I found were really informative up to about 2010, 11, 12. Yeah, about there, 2012 and 2015, and then of course the decks disappeared, and I've had to replace some of those decks that were very formative to me in those early years. Now let's start with the Native American Tarot, which of course was my really first deck. As you could see originally, once it disappeared I had to replace it, and so the deck is very, very different now in regards to the cardstock, etc. So you've seen maybe me use this deck, you've seen the imagery of it. It really is a superb deck, which I absolutely love in regards to imagery, etc. But what I think was really, really important to my early tarot study was actually the teachings. This book is fantastic in learning tarot, because when they go through the cards, they actually look at some of the history behind the cards, the reason why they've chosen the card. There's so much to it. I really found this a very informative, really formed my tarot readings. Really was the Native American Tarot by Magda Wet Gonzalez. Absolutely. Star Spider Woman, absolutely #1 in my decks. Now, what I did at the time was, you saw there were other Native American decks that I used as well. That sort of came into my process after a while, after I had used this deck, particularly in any psychic fairs that I was in, any readings that I was doing for clients, especially, after I was sort of been practicing tarot for a while on my own, and as I start to read for friends and family and start to really expand my tarot knowledge, that was the deck that sort of kept me going. And what I did was I had used the original Crystal Alley deck, the ones with the other deck. You would have seen the other backs, you would have seen that in my beginning of the video. But after 2017, as I was replacing my decks after they sort of disappeared from storage, I found I could not find the original and ended up buying the new deck, of course, which I absolutely love. This was just such a part of my process, working with the tarot and the oracle decks, the healing process for me. This was a really formative deck that I used really, really well in my practice. So that was a really huge thing. The book's amazing, everything within that. So definitely there. Now, I did get a 1JJ Swiss tarot deck, which I haven't replaced. Now, I've got that actually through a Body, Mind, Spirit magazine that was coming out fortnightly. But what I ended up doing was replacing it with this Claude Vidal, Lo Scarabeo, Tarot de Marseille type deck. So, because I think that was such an, using a Marseille type 1JJ Swiss as it was, using that sort of sense of imagery really sort of changed the way that I read tarot. It sort of taught me numerology and suits, and it sort of just gave me another perspective of working with tarot. So I felt that was quite an important deck. Now, you notice I didn't really bring out, I didn't have a Rider-Waite-Smith actual deck early on. That's not something that I would call in my formative practice. I don't think it really, I mean, even though it came later on, it didn't really do a lot for me. But the one deck that I really sort of resonated with recently, I think it's been quite formative in my Marseille type practice, has been the Spanish Tarot. Love it, love it, love it. Okay, I think it's been really formative in my tarot study of recent. Anyway, also too, oracle decks. Now, you saw that I had the original enchanted map, which I used a lot in readings, and I found it was very formative in the way that I connected with spirit in my mediumship when I was doing when spirits were coming through for the mediumship aspect of the reading. And so I had to replace it with the borderless version, which I'm absolutely rapt that I have. Okay, so that was a deck that was quite predominant in my tarot practice at that time. Other decks included Gateway Oracle and Soul Purpose, Soul Lessons as well, which I don't have now. Now, in regards to Lenormand, the deck that introduced it to me was Titiana's Fortune Tellers. Okay, and I was very, very lucky to be able to replace this deck, different backs. I was very, very lucky to be able to be given to be able to purchase, get this deck, sorry, not purchase it. I was able to receive this deck. Very, very rapt. This was very informative in my Leninmand learning. So that's sort of what I wanted to share with you. Now, what I want to share, decks that are quite important in this part of my journey. So just give me a minute while I sort out decks that are very, very sort of predominant or very formative in this part of my journey as I have re-established my tarot connection. Okay, there's lots of decks I could add to this part of it, but I don't want to get too overwhelmed with all the decks that are out there. Now, another deck that I had used in when I replaced was the New Zealand Fairy Oracle of the Putapere. Okay, this was a deck that I had used a lot in my original practice of working with cards, and I found this as a standalone deck absolutely brilliant in connecting with New Zealand energies. I just found it worked really well with my face-to-face clients. With me being in New Zealand, it was an absolute, it really connected to a lot of my clients. So I was really, really rapt with that. I found a lot of my clients would choose this deck for their reading. Okay, so now coming back into tarot after the decks disappearing, etc., and you see that I've replaced a lot of them. Now, some decks that I found were really important to me. One deck that I finally got round to to getting, because it was sent to me by the artist, basically was the Coffee Tarot. I had used this deck digitally with permission from the artist. I'd done a review on it. I had watched the growth of this deck. So I had found that this was quite formative in the way I viewed tarot in a more modern aspect, which was unusual for me. So I actually found this really, really inspiring for my tarot practice in many ways. Okay, so let's put that away. Another deck I have found very formative in my tarot practice to get to cultural decks and things like that was the Maori Tattoo Tarot by Roxanna. This has really, for me personally, has been a huge draw, a huge motivation to me working with cultural decks. This is just a beautiful, beautiful deck to work with. I just find it really, really inspirational. It really allows me to connect spiritually with the land that I'm on, if you know what I mean. It's not just I'm not Maori. I'm not. I don't have any Maori ancestral aspects to me. I just am very drawn to the respect of that energy. So that's a deck that has been quite formative in my practice at this time. Another deck has been the Starman Tarot by David Bowie. Now, when I received this deck, it really, the colours, the messages that were coming through were so formative to my tarot practice, was really drew me in a new way. It gave me a new life in regards to working with tarot. When I received this deck, it really did bring in a new level to my readings. I felt really inspired by it. So I've really felt this deck here was really it. Now, what I'm finding absolutely loving at the moment, of course, If you've been following me, you'll see that I'm working with the Primordial Tarot at the moment. Now I have revisited this again. I have worked with it before and I wanted to sort of dive a little deeper into it. I just feel like it keeps drawing me back in. At the moment, I'm just finding it is very allowing me to really sort of open up again, giving me that motivation to look at the cards on a deeper level. Now, a lot of decks I've put aside, I haven't done that with, but yet I keep getting drawn back to working with this one. So this is really interesting. It seems to have given me that really raw nakedness to the tarot. It just seems to bring out this energy that's just really raw. So hence working with this deck at this time, and I just have found it has really sort of formed the way that I'm reading, maybe working with the tarot at this time. So yeah, really interesting the way that certain decks inspire you in some way, inspire us in some way to be worked with. Anyway, so that's it from me. Don't forget to check the links below, check the links on my channel, like, subscribe and ring that bell so you know when the next video will be uploaded. Take care and blessed be.